The waitress locked the restaurant door behind me. She leaned in close and whispered, "Promise you won't pass out." Then she turned the screen toward me, and I saw my own son doing something that could have taken everything I owned. I'm glad you're here, because I've never told this story out loud like this before. Not fully. And if you've ever trusted family without question, only to realize too late that trust has a price, you'll understand why my chest still tightens when I think about that night. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if stories like this stay with you, please like and subscribe. It truly helps me keep sharing the truths I carried alone for too long. Now let me take you back. It was Friday, October 18th, 2024, just after 8:40 p.m., at a small Italian restaurant in Cleveland, Ohio called Bella Rosa Trattoria. Warm lighting, brick walls, the kind of place families go when they want to feel close, safe, proud of each other. That night was supposed to be a celebration for my son, Ethan Carter, 27 years old, newly promoted at Lakeview Logistics. He sat across from me in a pressed button-down, smiling like everything in his life was finally lining up. Beside him was his fiancée, Madison Lane, 26, perfectly styled, hands folded neatly in her lap. My sister Rachel was there too, sipping wine and watching everyone like she always did, quiet, observant, sharp. And then there was me, Hannah Carter, 46, divorced, careful, predictable, the woman who handled paperwork for a living and believed that if you followed the rules, nothing truly bad could happen. That belief had already started cracking hours earlier. At 3:17 p.m., while I was still at work at Cleveland Clinic, my phone buzzed with a notification from KeyBank. New device added to your online banking profile. My stomach dropped. I hadn't added anything. 2 minutes later, another alert appeared. External transfer scheduled, $4,800. My hands began to shake. I didn't tap the message. I called the number on the back of my card. A representative named Derek verified my identity, then paused. "Do you share banking access with any family members?" he asked. I didn't understand it then, but that question mattered more than anything else that night. By 5:30 p.m., I was sitting inside a KeyBank branch on Chagrin Boulevard, signing forms, canceling transfers, and watching a young banker print out login records I didn't recognize. An Android device, a password reset attempt, a recovery email change request. "This looks intentional," she said quietly. On my way home, I found an envelope waiting in my mailbox, official, heavy, unsettling. It was from Summit County Probate Court, mentioning my name in relation to a power of attorney inquiry. My chest tightened. I sat on my porch steps and tried to breathe. Still, I went to dinner, because denial can feel like strength when you don't want the truth. At Bella Rosa, Ethan hugged me. Maddie smiled. Rachel complimented my dress. We ordered food. We laughed. And then, casually, too casually, Ethan said something that made my pulse spike. "Mom, you really should update your paperwork. You know, just in case." I looked at him, searching his face for warmth. What I saw instead was calculation. And that was the moment I realized something was already in motion. What I didn't know yet was how far it had gone, or that I was about to see proof with my own eyes. After Ethan said it, "Mom, you should update your paperwork," I forced a small laugh like it was normal dinner conversation. Like he was being a thoughtful son. But my stomach stayed tight. Bella Rosa Trattoria was busy that night. The hostess kept weaving between tables with menus tucked under her arm. A couple near the window argued softly over a pasta order. In the corner, someone sang happy birthday off-key. It was ordinary in the way I used to trust. And my family looked ordinary too. Ethan kept talking about his promotion, his new responsibilities, how his supervisor, Mark Delaney, was finally noticing his potential. Maddie nodded at all the right moments, smiling like she'd rehearsed it. Rachel, my older sister by 3 years, played her favorite role, the one who pretended she was above everyone while still needing to control the room. I watched them carefully, the way you watch a street when you think a car might run the red light. Because hours earlier, I'd been warned by a bank representative that this kind of fraud often wasn't random. And I hated myself for even letting that thought attach to Ethan. I didn't understand it then, but my life had two tracks running at once, the one everyone could see, and the one happening quietly under the surface. On the surface, I was the steady mom. The woman who paid her mortgage on time, kept insurance current, remembered birthdays. I owned a small two-bedroom house in South Euclid, bought in 2016 for $189,000 after my divorce. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I'd refinanced in 2021, locked in a decent rate, and I was proud of the fact that I didn't need anyone to save me. My routines were simple. Wipe, groceries, gym twice a week if I was being honest with myself, Sundays at St. Bridget's Church when I could. Quiet evenings with tea and a show I barely watched because I was always sorting something. Mail, receipts, medical paperwork. I liked order. Order made me feel safe. Ethan was the center of my soft spot. I raised him mostly alone after his father, Greg Carter, moved to Florida and turned his parenting into a holiday tradition. Ethan was charming, affectionate, and smart in a way that could lean into lazy. But I told myself that was youth. Everyone finds their way eventually. And for a while, it seemed like he had. When Ethan started dating Maddie 2 years earlier, March 2022, I'd been relieved. She looked like stability. She had a neat little job at Everbright Dental as an office coordinator, always smelled like clean laundry, always said yes and no sir like she'd been trained. Rachel loved her immediately, which should have been my first warning sign. Rachel had always measured love like it was a business deal. She worked for Midwest Title and Escrow and loved to drop phrases like asset protection and liability. After our mother died in 2019, Rachel handled a lot of the estate paperwork and acted like she was doing me a favor by letting me exist in the same family. She'd remind me, often, that she was better with numbers. That night at dinner, she kept steering the conversation back toward money in a way that sounded like joking, but didn't feel like joking. Ethan's finally making real money, she said, swirling her wine. Now he can start thinking like an adult. Maddie laughed politely. Ethan smiled. Then Rachel looked at me. And you, Hannah, you still doing everything alone? Mortgage, utilities, insurance? You're a tough one. I manage, I said. That's what worries me, she replied, still smiling. You manage until you can't. And then people have to clean up the mess. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. It was such a small thing. A sentence dressed up as concern. But I felt it, like a subtle push to see if I'd stumble. Every few minutes, my mind jumped back to the evidence objects already piling up in my day. The bank alert, the printed login records, the probate court envelope sitting unopened on my kitchen counter. I hadn't told them about any of it. Not yet. I wanted to believe it wasn't connected to them. But then Ethan said it again, softer this time, like he was trying to sound caring. Mom, seriously, you should let me help with your accounts. It's just easier now. I could make sure nothing weird happens. My throat went dry. Nothing weird happens, I repeated, too calmly. Maddie reached for her water. Rachel's eyes flicked down toward my purse, just for a second, then back up to my face. I didn't understand it then, but that look wasn't curiosity. It was timing. And as the waitress came by to clear plates, I realized something that made my skin prickle. My phone wasn't in my purse anymore. I had set it on the table earlier, and now it was gone. How long had it been gone? And who had been close enough to take it without me noticing? The moment I realized my phone was missing, I didn't say anything. Not right away. I checked my purse once. Then again, slower, as if maybe the phone would magically appear if I was calm enough. It didn't. My throat tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Panic makes mistakes loud, and I wasn't ready to make any. I'm going to the restroom, I said, standing up. Ethan barely looked up. Maddie nodded. Rachel watched me a second longer than necessary. I walked past the bar, past the kitchen door, and into the restroom hallway. My hands were shaking now. I tried to steady them against the sink, breathing in through my nose like my therapist taught me years ago after my divorce. That wasn't the worst part. Not yet. I checked my Apple Watch. 8:51 p.m. I could still see notifications there, but no new alerts had come through. That meant my phone hadn't been powered off. Yet. I stepped back into the dining room and scanned the table from a distance. My purse sat where I'd left it. My jacket was still draped over the chair. My phone, a black iPhone with a cracked corner, was nowhere in sight. Then I noticed something small but wrong. Ethan's jacket was no longer on the back of his chair. My chest tightened. I didn't understand it then, but the timing mattered. I walked back toward the table slowly. As I approached, I saw Ethan slip his hand under the table and adjust something in his lap. Maddie leaned closer to him, whispering something I couldn't hear. Rachel took a sip of wine and avoided my eyes. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, a little too quickly. "Yes," I said. "Have either of you seen my phone?" Maddie shook her head immediately. "No, sorry." Rachel frowned. "You probably left it in the car." "I didn't," I said. "I used it to check the menu." Ethan's smile tightened. "Maybe it slid under the table." He stood up quickly, almost knocking his chair back, and bent down. My heart pounded as he reached beneath the tablecloth. He came back up empty-handed. "Oh," he said. "That's weird." We sat there in an awkward pause while the sounds of the restaurant swelled around us, forks clinking, laughter, plates being stacked. It felt like the world was moving normally while my body stayed frozen. Then my watch buzzed. A notification preview flashed across the screen. KeyBank, external transfer pending. My breath caught. That was action number 1 in this section. I checked my watch. "Excuse me," I said sharply, standing up again. "I need to make a call." Rachel sighed. "Hannah, you're being dramatic." But I was already walking toward the hostess stand. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I borrowed the hostess's phone. She looked startled but handed it over and called KeyBank again. This time, the representative's tone changed. She said. The transfer was reinitiated from a verified device. Verified. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down on a bench near the entrance. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I don't have my phone." There was a pause. Then, "Is your phone currently unlocked?" I swallowed. "It has Face ID." Another pause. Longer. "Then whoever has your phone could access your banking app," she said carefully. "Especially if they know your passcode." I thought of Ethan. Of how many times he'd watched me unlock my phone while we sat on my couch. Of how many times he'd borrowed it to look something up. Of how he'd joked that my passcode was too predictable. My chest felt tight. My mouth went dry. That wasn't the worst part, but it was close. I ended the call and stood up just as Ethan appeared behind me. "There you are," he said. "The waitress said you were looking for your phone." His voice was calm. Too calm. "Where is it?" I asked. He hesitated, just for half a second. "In the car," he said. "You must have dropped it." I stared at him, my own son, searching his face for truth. All I saw was calculation and something else, urgency. "That's not possible," I said quietly. "I drove here alone." Behind him, Maddie stood a few steps back, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Rachel lingered near the table, watching us like this was a scene she'd expected. Then the waitress approached us. She was young, maybe 22, with tired eyes and an expression that told me she'd already chosen a side. She said softly. "Could you come with me for a moment?" Ethan stiffened. "Why?" She ignored him and looked directly at me. "There's something you need to see." She glanced toward the ceiling, toward the cameras, and in that moment, I knew the doubt was over. Because whatever was happening with my money wasn't accidental. It was happening right here. And it involved my family. What I was about to see would turn suspicion into certainty and change how I saw my own son forever. The waitress led me down a narrow hallway past the storage room and into a small office that smelled like printer ink and old coffee. A metal desk sat against the wall, and above it, a monitor glowed with grainy black and white footage. She closed the door behind us. "Promise me something," she said quietly. "Promise you won't pass out." My chest tightened. I nodded. She clicked the mouse and rewound the video. The timestamp in the corner read 8:34 p.m., just minutes after we'd been seated. I leaned closer, my hands braced on the desk. That was action number 1. I leaned in and watched. On the screen, I saw our table from above. I saw myself laughing, reaching into the breadbasket. I saw Rachel talking with her hands, Maddie nodding politely. Then I saw Ethan. He stood up, pretending to adjust his jacket. He reached into my open purse, so smooth, so practiced, and slid my phone out in one clean motion. He turned his body just enough to block the view from the table. My stomach dropped. The video cut to a second camera angle near the bar. Ethan sat down, phone hidden in his lap. Maddie leaned toward him. Her mouth moved. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read her lips. Do it now. My throat closed. The waitress paused the video. I'm sorry, she said. I noticed because he kept looking up at the camera. That usually means someone's nervous. That wasn't the worst part, but it was close. She pressed play again. The footage jumped ahead to 8:38 p.m. Ethan's fingers moved fast over my phone screen. He didn't hesitate. He didn't fumble, like he'd done this before. My hand started shaking. I grabbed the edge of the desk, my nails biting into the metal. That was my physical reaction. My knees went weak. Can I have a copy of this? I asked. She nodded. The owner already burned it to a flash drive. We've had theft issues before. That was action number 2. I accepted the flash drive. I stepped out of the office feeling like I was underwater. The sounds of the restaurant felt muffled, distant. My son sat at the table, laughing at something Rachel said, like nothing had happened. I walked up behind him and said his name. Ethan. He turned. His smile faltered. Give me my phone, I said. He opened his mouth, closed it, then slowly reached into his pocket and handed it over. That was the moment the lie ended. I unlocked the phone immediately and opened my banking app. A transfer for $4,800 was pending, scheduled to go to an account I didn't recognize. The recipient name was M. Lane. Madison. I looked up at her. Her face drained of color. I didn't understand it then. I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. But now I do. Rachel stood abruptly. Hannah, you're overreacting. I turned on her. You knew. She didn't deny it. That silence told me everything. I pulled the probate court letter from my purse and set it on the table. Care to explain why my name is on a power of attorney inquiry? Ethan's jaw clenched. It was just paperwork, he said. You're always so stressed. We were trying to help. Sign it. It's just paperwork. That was one of the lines they thought would save them. My chest felt like it was collapsing inward. I pressed my palm against the table to steady myself. Then my phone buzzed again. A new email notification. Subject line, Home Equity Review, approved. My vision blurred. They weren't just taking my checking account. They were coming for my house. That was the lowest point. Sitting there, surrounded by people who shared my blood, realizing they had planned this together. The money, the paperwork, the timing, and the worst truth of all settled into my bones. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I was too quiet to fight back. I stood there shaking, my throat burning, tears threatening, but I didn't cry, because something else was replacing the pain. Clarity. And I knew, in that moment, that if they wanted paperwork, I was about to give them more than they ever expected. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even raise my voice. That surprised all of us. I gathered the flash drive from my purse, slipped my phone in beside it, and said calmly, I'm going home. Ethan stood up. Mom, wait. You're misunderstanding. No, I said, holding up one finger. I'm finally understanding. That was action number 1. I walked away. The drive home felt unreal. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. Every stoplight felt too long. My chest was tight, but my thoughts were suddenly sharp, lining up like files in a cabinet. That night, I didn't sleep. I made tea at 11:12 p.m., opened my laptop, and started working like this was just another compliance issue at the clinic. Because that's what it was. A breach. a coordinated one. Action number 2. I documented everything. I downloaded my full banking history from KeyBank, every login, every alert, every attempt. I printed the probate notice. I backed up the restaurant footage onto my laptop and an external hard drive. I changed every password I had, including my email, cloud storage, and utilities. I locked my credit through Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion before midnight. I didn't understand it then, but this was the moment I stopped being a victim. At 1:03 a.m., I found the email that made everything click. It was from Midwest Title and Escrow, dated October 9th, sent to Rachel's work address, and forwarded to an email I didn't recognize. The subject line read, Preliminary POA Review, Carter Property. My hand shook as I read it. Attached was a draft power of attorney document with my name typed neatly at the top. It listed Ethan as primary agent and Rachel as alternate. There was even a note in the body. Once signed, this will allow expedited equity access. That was the twist I hadn't seen coming, not just theft, but coordination. They weren't panicking. They were planning. I leaned back in my chair, my throat dry, heart pounding. I pressed my fingers into my palms until the shaking slowed. Then I started planning. That was action number 3. I called an attorney. At 9 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting across from Linda Moreno, a real estate and elder law attorney in Shaker Heights. I slid the flash drive across her desk and said, My family is trying to steal my house. She didn't flinch. By noon, she'd confirmed what I suspected. Someone had attempted to pre-qualify a home equity line of credit using my personal information. It had stalled because one signature was missing. Mine. They thought they could scare or rush you, Linda said. That's mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was bigger. Ethan had used my phone and left a digital trail, device fingerprints, timestamps, IP addresses. Compliance training teaches you this. People always forget the trail. Mistake number 3. Rachel had involved her workplace email in a personal scheme. Corporate systems log everything. I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger, not fear. Control. Linda helped me file an official fraud report. We froze any potential liens. She advised me to say nothing to my family. Not a word. Let them think you're confused, she said. People get sloppy when they think they've won. That night, I sat alone in my living room, lights off, staring at my house. The walls I'd painted myself, the floors I'd refinished on weekends. I felt the loss already, the betrayal, but I also felt resolve. I recorded a single note in my phone, just for myself. Family doesn't sue family. That was another line they believed in. I whispered it out loud, then shook my head. Because family also doesn't steal from family. And if they thought this was over, they had no idea what was coming next. The exposure didn't happen all at once. It happened cleanly, precisely, legally. That's how I wanted it. For 3 days, I stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no reactions. I let Ethan's messages stack up on my phone like unanswered debts. Mom, we need to talk. You're making this bigger than it is. Rachel says you're confused. At 9:14 a.m. on October 22nd, I took action. Action number 1, I authorized my attorney. Linda filed a formal fraud complaint with KeyBank, attaching the restaurant footage, login records, and timestamped alerts. Within hours, the receiving account, Maddie's, was flagged and frozen. The attempted $4,800 transfer never moved. By 11:30 a.m., I received confirmation that a suspicious activity report had been forwarded to federal compliance. That meant this was no longer just a family issue. That wasn't the worst part for them. Action number 2, I confronted them on record. I agreed to meet Ethan, Maddie, and Rachel at Linda's office. Neutral ground. Cameras in the hallway. Witnesses everywhere. They walked in smiling like they thought this was a misunderstanding. Ethan reached for my hand. I pulled back. Linda pressed play. The screen showed Ethan lifting my phone from my purse. Maddie leaning in. Rachel watching. No sound. No excuses. Ethan's face collapsed. Rachel stood up. This is insane. You're humiliating your own family. Linda slid a document across the table. This is evidence. Maddie whispered, it was just supposed to be temporary. That was the line viewers would repeat. You won't need this anymore. Action number 3. I signed a statement. I signed an affidavit confirming I had never authorized access to my accounts or property. I signed a cease and desist order barring Rachel from contacting me about finances. I signed a police incident report. Short sentences. Fast rhythm. Ethan cried. Maddie stayed at the floor. Rachel threatened to sue. And then the final blow landed. Linda revealed that Midwest Title and Escrow had opened an internal investigation. Rachel had violated company policy by using her work email and systems for personal gain. By 4:06 p.m., Rachel was placed on administrative leave. That was justice. No shouting. No revenge fantasies. Just consequences. The room went quiet. My chest felt tight, but steady. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Ethan looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Mom, I didn't think you'd actually do this. I met his eyes. That's the problem. The meeting ended without hugs, without apologies that mattered. They left separately. I stayed seated. That was the moment the power shifted. Later that evening, my phone buzzed one last time. A bank notification. Account security restored. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. The storm had passed, but the damage was real. They'd underestimated me. They'd thought love meant silence. They'd mistaken kindness for weakness. And now they knew the truth. You don't steal from someone who knows how systems work. And you definitely don't steal from a woman who's already lost everything once and survived. What came next wasn't victory. It was reckoning. And it would change our family forever. The silence afterward was the hardest part. Not the confrontation. Not the evidence. The quiet that followed. For weeks, my phone barely rang. Ethan stopped calling entirely. Maddie unfriended me on every platform without a word. Rachel sent one final text, 3 sentences long, perfectly spaced, as cold as legal letterhead. You've gone too far. Family doesn't do this. I hope you can live with yourself. I read it once, then deleted it. That was action number 1. I cut contact. Life didn't snap back into place. It sagged. It creaked. I kept going to work at the Cleveland Clinic, answering emails, filing reports, pretending nothing had happened. But at night, the house felt louder without voices that had once filled it. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the door frames, the small scratches I'd made over the years. This house had almost been taken from me by the people who knew it best. That loss sat heavy in my chest. At 10:30 p.m. most nights, I still checked my bank app. Even after everything was secured, even after the fraud flags were lifted, my hands would hover, my breath shallow, until I saw the balance unchanged. That was my physical reaction, my chest tightening, then slowly releasing. Ethan sent one email in November. No subject line, just a paragraph. He said he'd been under pressure, that Maddie had student loans, $38,000, that Rachel had convinced him it was temporary, that he never thought it would go this far. I didn't reply, because that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing how easily he believed I wouldn't protect myself. Rachel lost her job at Midwest Title and Escrow by the end of the year. The investigation confirmed misuse of company resources. She told extended family it was political and unfair. Some believed her. Some didn't. I stopped correcting people. That was action number 2. I let the truth stand on its own. By January, the legal dust settled. No charges were filed beyond the reports, but every account was locked down. My will was rewritten. My power of attorney was assigned to a neutral third party. My house title was protected under additional safeguards Linda recommended. I took control in ways I never had before. Action number 3. I rebuilt my boundaries. The holidays came and went quietly. I spent Christmas Eve alone with a book and a candle, listening to the wind outside instead of pretending everything was fine. It hurt, but it was honest. Slowly, something unexpected happened. I slept better. Not every night, but some. The constant hum of vigilance began to fade. I stopped jumping every time my phone buzzed. I started trusting my instincts again. Ethan tried once more in March. A voicemail. His voice sounded smaller. "I miss you," he said. "I don't know how to fix this." I sat on my couch, phone in my hand, and felt the weight of that sentence. I didn't erase it. I didn't answer it. Some things don't need resolution to be real. What changed wasn't just my finances or my legal protections. It was how I saw myself. I wasn't foolish for loving my family. I wasn't weak for trusting them. But I was done confusing love with access. And as spring light filled the house again, I realized something I never expected. I had survived their betrayal, and I was still standing. But the lesson it left me with, that one would take longer to fully understand. And that's what I want to leave you with now. It took me a long time to understand what this story was really about. At first, I thought it was about money, about fraud, about my house almost being taken from me. But that wasn't the core of it. The core was trust, and how quietly it can be weaponized when people think you won't fight back. I replayed everything in my mind for months. The dinner, the looks, the timing, all the moments I brushed off because I didn't want to believe the worst about the people I loved most. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. Love without boundaries isn't kindness. It's permission. I thought being a good mother meant always leaving the door open. I thought being a good sister meant keeping the peace. I thought silence was maturity. What I learned instead was this: silence is often what lets harm grow roots. I don't hate Ethan. That truth surprises people when I say it out loud. I hate what he chose. I hate how easily he let himself believe I was expendable. But I also understand how pressure, greed, and the wrong voices can twist someone's judgment. That understanding doesn't mean forgiveness. It means clarity. Rachel used to say, "Family doesn't sue family." What she meant was, family shouldn't hold each other accountable. And that belief protects the wrong people far too often. Here's the part one wants you to really hear. Especially if you're someone who manages the bills, the paperwork, the quiet responsibilities no one thanks you for. Being underestimated is dangerous for the people doing the underestimating. They thought I wouldn't check. They thought I wouldn't document. They thought I wouldn't act. They were wrong. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: you can love people deeply and still protect yourself completely. Those two things are not opposites. Today, my life is quieter, smaller in some ways, but it's honest. My accounts are secure. My house is still mine. My boundaries are firm. And my peace, hard-earned as it is, belongs to me. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if a small warning bell has been ringing in your own life, don't ignore it just to keep the peace. Ask questions. Read the paperwork. Trust your instincts. Because sometimes the biggest danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who know exactly where you keep your trust. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. And here's the final truth I live by now. Love never requires you to give someone the keys to your life.